Hello, friends of Sudoku, and welcome to the New York Times Hard Sudoku. Today is Wednesday, the 22nd of November, 2023. A subscriber recently asked, why don't I try to explain how to transition from using pencil marks to notation-free solving of Sudokus? I thought that was an excellent suggestion. And while I don't quite know how to go about explaining that, I will make an attempt in this video. First of all, why solve notation-free in the first place? There's absolutely nothing wrong with using notation. And I use notation when I solve difficult puzzles. The New York Times don't usually represent much of a problem, but they can be a little tricky. So why do I try to avoid pencil marks? I think actually there are two parts of the answer. One part is I like the mental challenge. It is obviously much harder to solve a Sudoku without using pencil marks than it is the other way around. But I like to challenge myself. The other reason is more abstract. It is a matter of elegance. I would compare this to the use of chopsticks. I'll explain what I mean. You see, there are 4 countries in the world where chopsticks are in daily use, and those countries are Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and China. Those are the only 4 countries where chopsticks are inherently in use. And I've used chopsticks for something like 40 years. I also use chopsticks when I eat in Denmark at home. The only times that I actually don't use chopsticks is if I have to dig into a big juicy steak or if I eat soup. But even noodle soup you use with a spoon and chopsticks. And why do you think that is elegant? Well, it's a matter of taste. I just think it's more elegant to use chopsticks to fish out bits of food from a plate or from an eating bowl than having to stab at it with a fork. And I kind of view solving Sudokus without notation in the same manner. I think it's more elegant to be able to solve a grid without messing about with a lot of pencil marks. But again, it's just me, and any way that you can solve a Sudoku is fine. But back to how to transition. I think I would suggest going about using pencil marks the way that you usually do, with one exception. And that is if you have pairs of numbers in a row, a block, or in a column. If I come across that constellation in this video, I will point out why I wouldn't recommend using pencil marks for those, because you have to start someplace, right? You also need to develop a little bit of short-term memory skills, because it's clear that if you don't have the pencil marks as your support, you will need to try to memorize something, because one thing that is holding you back, just as if you were speed reading, if you were pronouncing all the words out loud while you speed read, you are definitely not going to speed read. And if you don't remember or try to remember possible candidates in squares, then you are going to have to analyze them time and again while you solve a puzzle. And that is certainly also not going to contribute to a speedy solve. So let's see if we come across some places in this puzzle where I would recommend that you dispense with the pencil marks. First of all, I really ache to enter a 7 here, because we have these 2 7s blocking up here, and we have this 7 blocking across here. So a 7 must go here. And now I see the first pair of squares where I would suggest that you don't enter pencil marks. And that's these 2 squares here. And the reason you shouldn't enter pencil marks here, that it is very obvious that a 3 blocks over here and a 3 blocks down here, so a 3 must go here or here. If you look at the grid, you move backwards 30 or 40 centimeters and you look at the grid, you can easily see how this column and this row converge here, and all of these 4 squares are blocked by 3s. So it's clear that a 3 must go here or here. And this is where I would probably recommend that you don't use pencil marks. I mean, you've got to start someplace, right? And here's another place that I would recommend that you don't use pencil marks. You see the 6 blocking across here and the 6 blocking up here. It's clear that one of these must be a 6. Once you see this, I mean, for me personally, it's really difficult to unsee it. So for me, it would be a waste of time and effort to enter pencil marks here for the 6s, because it's just so obvious that these squares can't be 6. And while I'm looking at this 6, I'm scanning downwards, and this 6 lets me scan upwards, and now I see this 6 blocking across. So I found the 6, it goes here. The next pair of pencil marks that I wouldn't use myself is a 5 in these two squares, because it's rather obvious that this 5 blocks this square and this 5 blocks this square. So it's really clear that a 5 can only go in one of these squares. And while I'm examining these two squares, I'm also seeing this 4 blocking down and this 4 blocking up. So if you were to use pencil marks and not thinking about trying to get rid of those, you would enter a 4 and a 5 pair here. My contention, though, is that how hard is it really to remember that these squares must be a 4 and a 5? I don't think that's hard. So while I'm remembering the 4 and the 5 here, I immediately start looking at these 3 squares to see what is still missing in the block. And missing is a 2, 3, and a 9. So I know that one of these must be a 2. The 3 and the 9 I can't really do much about, but I am keeping an eye on all 4 empty squares here. The 3 I know must go here, here, or here, and I know the 9 must go here, here, or here. So we got a 2, 3, and a 9. One more number is missing from the column, and that number would be a 7. And since a 7 blocks here and here, and this 7 blocks here, we know that this must be the 7. And now we are closing in, I think, a little bit more on these 3 empty squares. 4 and 5 here, 2, 3, 9 here. We also need a 2, 3, 9 here. And here we can see the 2 and the 9 force a 3 to go here. So these must be a 2 and a 9. And I can immediately see that I can't solve those at the moment. I know that these are 4 and 5. So that raises a question. If these are 2 and 9, these are 4 and 5, then this must be a 3. Now I go back up looking at the 3s. I see this 3 blocking across and this 3 blocking across. So instead of entering a couple of pencil marks here for a 3, I quickly scan downwards and I see this 3, and that gives me a 3 here for free. We need only 3 more numbers to complete column 2, and they must be an 8, 9, and a 7. We got 7 blocking here, we got 7 blocking here, so 7 must go here, right? Now I immediately look to the right, and instead of blindly entering pencil marks here for a 7, it doesn't take any effort at all to look upwards and see that this square can't be a 7. Ergo, the 7 must go here. And I owe it to myself to now look upwards and see this 7 blocking up, this 7 blocking down, this 7 blocking over. Here's a 7. Here now we need an 8 and a 9 for these two squares. And I can see that I don't know how to place them yet, so I'm not even going to think about those anymore for some time. I need some more action in this block here and in this row before I know where to place the 8 and the 9s. So instead, I'm going to look at these 3 squares. There must be a 1, 4, and a 9. So instead of blindly entering pencil marks for these squares, I look everywhere where these empty squares are involved. This 9 and this 1 block here. So the only number that can go here is a 4. And a 1 and a 9 now must go here. I could enter now a small 1 here and a 9 and a small 1 and a 9 here as pencil marks. But why bother? It's so obvious, at least to me, that these must be a 1 and a 9. So having dealt successfully with the center shoot and with the left shoot, I now just scan the grid for anything that is obvious. And the first thing that really catches my eye is that we have a couple of 4s blocking these 5 squares. So a 4 must go here. And that prompts me to look to the right to see if anything turns up. And something does turn up indeed. We have a 4 here and a here blocking these squares. And we have a 4 here blocking this square. So here's a 4. Now I really need to look down. And I see this 4 blocking down, this 4 blocking up. It's clear that a 4 must go here. And this is now where memory comes into play. Remember, the first thing we found was that a 4 and a 5 must go in these two squares. And because we analyzed that already, there's no reason at all to rethink that and to try to second guess ourselves. Having found this 4 now, we know that this must be the 5 and this must be the 4. And now I go back to seeing if I can spot anything that is so obvious that I feel embarrassed that I didn't see it earlier. One of the things that I see now is that this 2 blocks up and this 2 blocks over, so a 2 must go here. And that prompts me, of course, to look for 2s up here. I can't see any obvious place for a 2, so I look further down and see if something turns up, and nothing really turns up. But I can see that these 2s here block down, so a 2 must go here, here, or here. And that's something that I always do, and I can see no obvious solution to those 2s at the moment, so I quickly turn my attention to other places in the grid. One of the things that I like to do is look at empty squares when there are very few left in a row or in a column or in a box. Here we are looking for a 1, 9, and a 6. And we have a 1 and a 9 blocking here, so it must be a 6. And these must be a 1 and a 9 now. And having found this 6, I really have to look to the left and see that these 2 6s block these 3 squares, giving me a 6 here. And we are back to having only 3 squares left here and 3 squares left here. Let's do those one after each other and see if we can find any new number here. Here we're looking for a 1, 8, and a 5. We have an 8 blocking here and here, so it's clear that this must be an 8. Now I look upwards and see, yes, was something going on with an 8 and a 9 here? Now the 8 becomes very plausible, but an 8 could go here as well, so I'm not going to do anything yet. I just keep it in the back of my head. Now we know what this square is, because this square is what these 2 are not. And these 2 have to be a 1 and a 5. The 5 blocks up here, so here is a 1 and here's a 5. And that makes a 9 out of this square. Now we know what to do with these 2 squares, don't we? Because this 9 blocks over, this must be an 8 and this must be a 9. No need to analyze those again. We can figure out what these 2 are, because we know that these 3 have got to be a 2, 3, and an 8. I can't solve those yet, but since these are 2, 3, and 8, we need to find a 1 and a 9 up here. And the 9 blocks over here, so here's a 1, and here is a 9. Now we can find and almost complete the top suit, the 1 blocks over, giving me a 1 for this square. And here we need to find a 2 and a 5. I don't know how to place them yet, but we are getting very, very close to the finishing line now. We have a couple of 1s blocking up and down and 1 blocking here. So yes, you could enter a pencil mark for these 2 squares, but really, look at this. You can see. It's like making a drawing with helping lines. They have to be so fine that you can almost not see them, because you're going to erase them when you start applying the ink, right? Here, you just don't need these ones. You can remember them. And while we are talking about these ones, we also have 1 blocking down here and 1 blocking over here. So we're going to have 1 here, here, or here. Just something to keep in mind, along, of course, with a 9 that goes here, here. And here it's a good idea to be a little creative, because I just talked about the 9s, and that prompts me to see if I can do anything with the 9s. And the 9 blocks down here, right? So a 9 is going to go either here, here, or here, blocking down. This 9 blocks across. So it's clear that this must be the 9. And while we are speaking of 9s, this 9 now blocks across, and this 9 blocks across. This 9 blocks down, so a 9 is forced into this position. And now we have this 9 blocking here, and that tells me that this cannot be a 9. Ergo, this must be the 9, and this must be the 1. We have a 1 empty square left here, And that has got to be an 8, of course. I think I want to have another look at these 3 squares. There must be an 8, 2, and a 6. And yes, we could do something because we found a few numbers and we have a 2 and an 8 blocking down here. So here's a 6 and these must be a 2 and an 8. And I still can't solve those, but we found a 6. And this 6 blocks up here very conveniently and this 6 blocks across. So we can enter a 6 here. And by the way, about the pencil marks, we could enter a pair of 2 and 5 here. But is it really difficult to remember the 2 and the 5 that must go there? I think not. Really, it's not. So let's see if we can do something more with these squares here. We need to find a 1, 2, and a 5. And that should be pretty easy because we have this 5 blocking down. So a 5 must go here. And we now need a 1 and a 2 for these squares. Also easy because this 1 blocks here. So the 2 is forced here and the 1 is forced here. And now we can enter something here, and that something has got to be an 8. And the last 2 numbers here must be 1 and 3. Also quite easy because we have this 1 blocking across, giving me a 3 here and a 1 here. See? No pencil marks necessary. And since we found this 3, we really must now look to the left and see if that has any ramifications. And it does, because this 3 blocks down, giving me a 3 here. And remember how we began by saying we don't really need a pencil mark for 3s for these 2 squares? And I'm sure because I mentioned that you still remember that a 3 had to go in one of these 2 squares. And now you know which one it's going to be because this 3 blocks here, right? So here's a 3. Only 2 empty squares here now. And they must be a 2 and a 6. We have a 6 blocking down here, so the 2 must go here and the 6 must go here. Here we need an 8 and we need a 3. 3 blocks over. Here's the 8. Here's the 3. We can figure out what this must be. It must be a 2. And now we go back up here. Remember how these were 2 and a 5? The 2 now forces a 5 here and the 2 must go here. This square can only be an 8. We need to find an 8 for one of these 2 squares and this 8 blocks down. So an 8 must go here. The other number is a 5. It must go here. And I've already seen this 5 blocking across from earlier and this 5 blocks up. So it's clear that a 5 has got to go here. These are 2 and a 9 still. So we need also a 2 and a 9 for these squares. And this 2 forces a 9 to go here, 2 here, 2 here, and a 9 here. I think this, again, was a case of a pretty easy New York Times hard Sudoku puzzle, about on par with yesterday's version. And also, I hope that my explanation about pencil marks did help you a little. It's just a matter of getting started. And again, there's nothing wrong with using pencil marks if that's your preferred style. I just try to explain to you why I think that not using pencil marks is more elegant and a better mental challenge for me. Thank you for watching and bye for now.